There we go. Okay. Okay, we are now live. Welcome, everyone. I hope we are live. Okay, we are in Conversations with Chana. I'm Chana Weisberg. I'm the editor of thejewishwoman.org, and I am here with a very dynamic couple tonight. We are meeting with Gitti, Rabbi Inan, and Gitti Francis. Rabbi Francis is the principal and assistant head of the school, Torah Day School in Houston, Texas. And Gitti is a community integration specialist for the Jewish Family Service. Did I get that all right?
I think that's pretty.
Those are
okay.
pretty big
That
mouths.
Yeah, we can simplify it if you want.
Okay, so in other words, they're a really, really busy couple, a very dynamic couple, very involved community couple, and they are very involved with the community in Houston, and Houston is very lucky to have them as part of their community. So we're meeting with them. Say hello to us on Facebook just to let us know that we are actually live and that you are seeing us. We'd love to see who's joining us. Tell us where you're coming from, where you're joining us from, because we have a great program in store for you tonight. Okay, I do see we are live. Wonderful, and I'm seeing some comments from people. So if you do have any comments or questions throughout the interview, I'll be looking at Facebook Live. We are on Chabad.org Facebook Live, and I am here in conversation with Chana, joined with Rabbi Inan and Gitti Francis, all the way from Houston, Texas. And we have some people joining us. We have a shalom from New York. We have a shalom from Norway. Wow. And we have someone who's a fan of you. Yay, Francis is. So that's nice. Always nice to feel welcomed, right? We have someone from, let me see if I can pronounce this, Zephyr Hills, Florida, from Bakersfield, California, from Metro Detroit. We have people from all over joining us. Thank you all for joining us. We are in conversation with Chana, speaking with the Francis family. Okay, let's get right into it. So we're trying to get together for some time now with both of you. And just life got in the way, plus being such a busy couple, it got in the way. And then when we had rescheduled, I think you both had COVID. Is that what happened at one point?
Right.
Okay. And then we rescheduled, and you were really stuck in the Houston snowstorm, the unusual Houston snowstorm in the wintertime, in the regular, what we get here, you got there, but you weren't really so prepared for us. And perhaps you can tell us a little about that as well. And then finally, we're meeting now. So actually, my husband and I also just had COVID. We're just recovering from it. And that's why in conversation with Chana, these interviews have not been showing regularly. But we're back, and thank God we're back. And we're here with Rabbi Inan and Gitti Francis. So tell us a little about yourselves. Tell us a little about what you both do professionally. So why don't we start with you, Rabbi Inan?
I was going to defer to Gitti, but since you've established the rules of engagement, so I'll just go right at it. So what I do is we are shluchim to Houston, Texas. Here we work directly close with Rabbi and Mrs. Lazarov Sr. and Rabbi Chani and Rabbi Chaim and Chani Lazarov, and we run the Mosid here. And our particular, or is talking about myself now, I'll let Gitti, fend for herself. But what I do is I am the principal of Torah Day School. What I do is I do all things educational. I do things financial. I do fundraising. I do our major annual campaign, setting tuition, collecting, setting up systems of collection of tuitions, things financial, things educational, and that's what we do. Beyond that, beyond the educational and the school, what we do is that we help our community as much as possible. We serve as role models, dugma chayes, as much as possible, as humanly possible as we try to do. We try to teach when we can. chavrusas, shiurim chassidus, and we try to do whatever we can in order to support our community.
Wow,
That's I guess our side. That's my side, right?
that sounds pretty busy. So basically, you're doing a lot of things there, running the whole school, running everything about the school. What is is this a day school?
So this is a day school. This is a school that was started by Rabbi and Mrs. Lazaroff. I work very closely with Rabbi and Mrs. Lazaroff on all aspects of our school, both now and looking into the future. And there's a lot to do day by day, it keeps me very busy.
So you lead the children. What are the ages of the children in the school?
We start 18 months to grade 8.
Oh wow! Okay.
We have a very vibrant early childhood center. Come check us out, Chabad.org. Go check it out. Or maybe you're supposed to. I don't know. Maybe that's your domain. I don't know. I'm just used to selling it, so I just throw it out there. If you want to take a look. Okay. I actually just changed over our whole website. To tell you the truth, I just went live yesterday. Just changed it, the whole thing. Ooh,
the whole thing. So we got to check it out. Wow.
Check it out.
Okay.
There you go.
Amazing. So Houston has an amazing day school. That's good to know. Fabulous. And Gitti, tell us a little about yourself.
All right. So professionally, what I do is I work at Jewish Family Service. I started about 3.5 after Hurricane Harvey. So my husband and I together ran a lot of the Hurricane Harvey, the Chabad Harvey relief that we did. And then sort of the relief efforts went into more of like a longer term care since we were sort of like the first responders. So that's when I started working at Jewish Family Service, part-time as a case manager to people whose homes have flooded. About a year later, I started getting into the community intervention work. Unfortunately, Houston had in the last decade or so, 5 or 7 years, too many suicides, and really one suicide is too many. But there was a cluster of suicides in the Jewish, and then after I did the work with the case management, kind of the Harvey work was sort of petering out a little bit. We still have case managers that do that kind of stuff, but they put me in doing the community intervention, primarily suicide prevention, and also with community trainings, like community mental health literacy trainings, bringing mental health to the community. Generally, the role of models with outpatient mental health clinics is that people come to you and they say, I think I'm experiencing this, what's happening? But we also want to do a model that's more a continuum of care. So it doesn't really start with somebody coming into your office. It starts with signs and symptoms early on. And there is a lag time from when people first start seeing symptoms until when they go and, access help. And over the span of a lifetime, if it takes about a decade or 5 or so years from when you first see symptoms occur till when you get help, that's a very long time to be living in pain.
Wow.
So really what it is, we sort of bring it out there.
What kind of symptoms are we talking about that we would see over the period of 5 years?
Well, if you want to come to my signs and symptoms workshop, no, I think it's just like the general symptoms of anxiety, general symptoms of depression. A lot of it is a lot of people don't really know what they're living with or what they're suffering from. Like if somebody has a generalized anxiety disorder and they're constantly feeling nervous, they don't know that there's help that they can get with it. They feel like that's just the way I am and that's just the way God created me and I can live with that. You may be able to live better without it. If somebody's, for example, living with asthma, right? We have a son actually, right? Somebody's living with asthma, they know they take their inhaler everywhere they go, right? Wherever we go on trips and stuff like that. But if somebody's living with anxiety, they take their anxiety anywhere they go. And there are tools and there are tips and there is psychoeducation and there's self-help strategies. There's so much things that we could do to help the anxiety. You don't necessarily have to take it everywhere you go, or you don't necessarily have to have symptoms on a regular basis. There'll be flare-ups. You'll probably live with anxiety for the rest of your life, the same way some people live with dental pain and some people live with other things. But there are ways to treat it so that it's bearable and that you can live really, really well and healthy with it.
Wow, that's incredible. I think in today's times, so many people are living with anxiety. Do you find that's happening more and more in today's, especially with COVID, especially with all the trauma that people are going through? I mean, you're in Houston, you just went through that crazy snowstorm. Are you seeing this trauma in the children? Are you seeing in the children of your schools, Rabbi Francis, and in the community that you're working with in general, Gitti?
So I'll just answer from the schooling perspective that thank God there's a lot of resilience to here in Houston. I mean, if we really like sum it all up, we scheduled winter from February 15th to February 29th. We just had one big package, and but, without not having heat and plumbing, that was that was a very challenging kind of time. During time I was able to actually get some schooling in, however truncated, the day was truncated a little bit. And the fact that we were able to have the kids come to school, even for a little, really created a lot of relief. It provided relief to a lot of people that we're not going into some perpetual state of lockdown. But that was really a big thumbs up for our community, being able to pull that one off for our kids. But
the school had heating, and it was able to function.
So yeah, so we couldn't be. Water was kind of sketchy for a little bit, so we truncated the school schedule to, let's say, 2 hours, which isn't a lot of time, but it allowed us to get to school, and we should start our tefillah, we start our davening, we get a little bit of learning in, and it created some schedule in the day throughout all the chaos when really the biggest part was not knowing what's going to come next. So there is a measure of anxiety which kind of lingered with our students, not knowing what was going to happen until the adults really provided the security to say, okay, we're done with this. The water works in my house, the water works in the school, and we're going to be all systems ahead moving forward. So you always have, and then you have different types of people. You have some people that are prone to anxiety, or they're living with anxiety. It's a major issue. We see it all throughout the educational enterprise all the time, and in Gitti's work, definitely in my work. And then you have some others that are a little less prone to anxiety, but may have, let's say, a generalized state, but not, let's say, ongoing. But overall, I think that we're okay. Overall, I think that there's some that need a little more support, and we're sensitive to those who needed that support. But overall, I think the kids were resilient and things were good.
Wow. What are some tools? I mean, you spoke, Gitti, about different tools that people could take with them to these situations of anxiety. Can you both share with us some things that you try to do with helping people, whether it be adults, children, the youth of our community? What are some things that people out there can be doing for their families, for people that they know? Because, like you said, I think the suicide rate has gone up, over the last little while, and one suicide is way too many. But we're not even talking about, it doesn't even need to be something as severe as suicide, just the fact that people are living with such anxiety, and that the circumstances in our lives are so full of such drama lately, and such confusion, and so much unknown. What are some tools that people could take with them?
So before Gitti jumps in, this is like her specialty. Before she jumps in, I just identify a very important point, that in general, anxiety in education is a newer concept. And what I find is that you have, let's say, generational thinking when it comes to interacting with students that have anxiety. We're coming from a generation that says we all get nervous before the test, not a big deal, man up and take that test, or right. You have to have that grit and move forward. But it's really a newer science that we're beginning to just now see the neurological impact, the brain chemistry that really impedes learning. We're just beginning to start to see this, and we're just beginning to talk about it, and talk about how the brain functions when it comes to teaching classes. Because many times you have kids that come to school that they've gotten out of the car, and they may have had an altercation with a sibling, that may have forgotten something. There's there's stress in the family, and the kids are not coming to school ready to really feel safe enough to learn, because they're full of anxiety, right? Cortisol and these different brain chemistry that really impedes that learning. So it's really a relatively new science, where we have the interface between education and neurology, which is really important right now. And I would really emphasize the need in educators to really begin to learn about how the brain functions and teach your students how they're feeling in their classrooms, to identify what's going on, to say, well, what kind of phase am I in right now? So when we have students in a classroom, you're able to identify the phase that they're whatever behaviors that they're manifesting, you're able to say, hey, wait.
Oh, it looks like we just lost you. That was a fascinating part of the discussion. And for some reason, the Francis have just gone off. We're going to wait a few seconds and hopefully they will rejoin us. Okay, yep, they're coming back on. Okay, we lost you for a sec there. Hold on. We lost you. We lost you just at
We're
the
back.
right time. That was so interesting. Wow. Okay, you're back.
Just enough time for me to think, well, maybe I should pass it over at this point.
Well, before you do,
bring it under the table. That was our way of like, hey.
yeah, we're disappearing. We're talking about anxiety. We're gone, right? But I do want to ask you something about what you were saying, though, because I find that fascinating. You know, you said that our generation, and I think I'm older than both of you, but probably the same generation. We grew up that you're right. Like it was a matter of just own up to it, live with it, and just, you know, it wasn't be a man about it, but be a woman about it, and just go ahead and handle the anxiety. Do you think that we coddle children too much nowadays, or we coddle people in general, that we don't realize that? I mean, you spoke about the resilience of children. So where's the balance between taking very seriously all this anxiety and coddling them in a sense of just, you know, not allowing them to become resilient and to realize how strong they actually are on their own?
Right. So I know it's in vogue to say now, especially among millennials, especially many of my older staff members, that there is a stereotype that there's over coddling. There is a degree of truth to it. There is I wouldn't call it, I wouldn't say that it is, I would say it is somewhat of a stereotype. I wouldn't say that it's completely true of every family, circumstance, that all families today of millennials or anybody in between the ages of 20 and 40 overprotect their children, that don't want to see their children unhappy at any state. And a lot of it has to do with, again, your parenting styles, and your philosophies of what child happiness is, and what your values are, and what gives you pride and what gives you shame. Like all these things go into our different methodologies of parenting, and everybody has a very different way. There is, again, I want to underline, there is this ongoing stereotype that there is too much coddling, but it's interesting to think about who's perpetuating the stereotype, and is it really individuals, or is it individual taste and just character types, or is it overall parents these days are just helicopter parents all the time? And I think that there are different needs that this generation is faced with. I mean, you ask any school administrator about social media right now. So I have email. They know my private email. I've got my school email. I've got my WhatsApp. I've got 2 numbers. Those who really know how to get me several ways, and then there's all other ways to get me. Never my home phone, for whatever reasons, but every other device, yes, they have you on. So I think that when you have such accessibility, when I know that I can always get my principal, and I can always get my teacher, and I sit down with my students, and I live with their anxiety, their ups and their downs, I feel empowered to be able to make that phone call, and the distance is so much less. It used to be, I was flipping back to old manuals of school administration a few weeks ago, and I saw like old memos. It's like we were lucky if our parents got a monthly letter home from the schools. There was no contact, right? Now, if every class has a WhatsApp, and if the school doesn't make the WhatsApp themselves, the parents underground make the WhatsApp. So you might as well make the WhatsApp, because it's going to happen whether you like it or not, right? So all of these different communicative realities in modern society create an impact where there's greater accessibility of teachers, greater accessibility, which gives the feeling that people may be hovering or more concerned. But I think it's really a reality of living in the march of progress and technological age, that we have, I can get you at any time of the day. So whereas it used to be, I have to bite my tongue. I'm upset about something. I wouldn't be able to do that for those parents who feel the interest and the impulse to reach out to a teacher. And then there are many parents that always had the impression that, I trust the school and whatever they do, it's all good. And that's also a generational thing.
Those kind of parents, really?
I'm that kind of parent,
I will say there is a march toward individuality of individuals in general. People are looking for excellence in their own right, meaning to say we're not looking at look at differentiation in education, for example. We no longer look at one size fits all. Classrooms have to all be the same. And any teacher that shows up to parent-teacher conference says, well, your child is here, but the class is here. Nobody wants to hear that. What we want to hear is, so what are you doing for my child to help my child excel? People don't want to hear today about how your child's not doing as well. They want to say, well, that doesn't bother me. I want to know how you, boots on the ground, are going to take my child from point A to point B. That's where it's all about. How do you create excellence to help children find their gifts, their God-given gifts, in however way they manifest? Take them to the next level. It's kind of almost like designer education, so to speak, tailored to the individual. And that's really a sense of the times. It's really part of the zeitgeist, because are interested in tailoring their own reality. Right? So that's very
interesting. When we talk about the Rebbe, though, and Chassidus, it seems like the Rebbe was so ahead of his time in terms of educating the individual. Does some of your, I know you have an extensive background in Hasidic thought, and you were raised in the Lubavitch community. Does that affect your way of looking at education and the way that you educate children? And does that affect you in terms of how you're dealing with the anxiety around you? And explain it to us how.
So I think that it's really a guiding principle. There are many, many days, if not every day, I will sit down in my office and ask myself, what would they want for this child? What would the Rebbe want me to do? In other words, the Rebbe entrusted me to be in this school, this moised, to do the best that I can to try to help every child. Not to allow children to fall through the cracks as, things happen, but to do the best I can. And when faced with issues which are very challenging and full of tension, I have to take a step back often and say, what would the Rebbe want me to do? Case in point, one of the major reflective points that I had in this particular issue was about a very challenging issue that our school went through a little while ago in regards to vaccinations, right? So the entire world, this was a really hot button issue in education. And many schools were saying, okay, if you're not vaccinated, you have to leave. And if you are vaccinated, then you could stay. Shuls were saying you have to leave. You had rabbinical courts coming, rendering, this is right before COVID. COVID came and really redeemed us from this one, right?
This was before COVID, because I thought you're touching on like the most hot button issue around.
Right. Not yet. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
We'll see what happens, right? So, and one parent asked me, point blank, he says, and we were dealing with this issue. He says, when you're dealing with this family, did you write a letter to the Rebbe about this? Did you write in? And I said, no, I did not. From that point onward, I said to myself, when you're dealing with neshamas, you're dealing with Jewish children and their families, that when you come to that point where the world is telling you one thing, you can't rely on yourself. You have to ask for those blessings. You have to ask for those brachas to ensure that you're sure-footed, because you just never know, and it's a tremendous responsibility. The best thing I can do is sit down and write, or to just to connect to a higher source, and hope. I
guess that's what you mean by writing. You're connecting to something, to your source, and really connecting to your true self in terms of how do you want to handle this? How do you want to handle this Jewish soul? Wow.
So it's an awesome responsibility.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. So let's go back. Gitta, you were going to say some ways of how you deal with anxiety, or how you help people deal with the anxiety. And you can mix in your, Torah Hasidus as well, if that's what you'd like to do, or in general, what would you do with someone who is going through anxiety? What are some steps that people could take?
Well, I think that the first thing that people want to do is they don't want to diagnose themselves and they don't want to diagnose each other. I think it's important for people to understand. Many times in my trainings, I would say one of the most often question that I get in my trainings is, how do I know the difference between anxiety? How do I know when it's time to seek professional help? Then we, kind of may augment it a little further and say, how do I know when it's time to take medication? How do I know when it's, all that kind of stuff? So how do you as an individual know that your anxiety is too much for you, you're on your own self to handle, and that you need to seek professional help? And that before it does get to the point of professional help, what can you do to lower your anxiety a little bit? So that's how I'm going to answer that question in a few ways. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that when you know what to seek professional help is if your thoughts, and this could be about anxiety, depression, a lot of different mental health conditions, not necessarily anxiety, but anxiety actually, I would say it affects the most amount of people for the most part. So how do you know that it's time to seek professional help is when your thoughts and your behaviors and your emotions affect your ability to do what you want to do, to carry out your daily activities, to engage in meaningful relationships, if you can engage in meaningful relationships, and also if it inhibits your work, your ability to do your work. So if, let's say, I'm anxious and I can't sleep the night before, but I get to work on time, then I probably don't need to see a professional about my anxiety. But if it comes to the point where I can't get out of bed in the morning, or my husband and I can't engage meaningfully, I can't engage meaningfully with my kids, I can't do the things that I want to do on a regular basis. In short, there's actually a very short way of saying this. If your anxiety or your depression or your thoughts and emotions inhibit your ability to live the way that you want to live, to love the way that you want to love or be loved, and to laugh. So it's sort of like the 3 L's of when to seek professional help. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is the self-help strategies.
But just to interrupt for a second, because I love interrupting. But what about, you gave that example of the person with asthma before. So what if it is that, we're functioning with our anxiety, we're waking up in the morning, we're going to work, we're in a relationship, but it could be so much better. Maybe we're functioning at a high level of anxiety, but we're still functioning. Are there some tools that we can be using to lower our anxiety?
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, for sure. So this is where the self-help strategies come in, right? And a lot of people don't realize, everybody realizes, the way that our bodies are made, the way that we as human beings are wired, is when something happens to us that makes us nervous, we get anxious. It's our fight or flight mechanism. There's nothing we could do to stop ourselves. Generally, we judge ourselves. Oh, it's my anxiety again. Oh, I'm walking into this party with my social anxiety. Why judge ourselves? What are some of the tools that we could do? And then when you start judging yourself, it becomes like this, and I'm so bad at this, and I'm so bad at this, and then it just becomes a plethora of complaints against yourself, right? So what do you do if you have functional anxiety? We get nervous about certain things. What is it that we do? And I'll be honest with you, it's interesting because as mental health professionals right now, generally you don't really live with the same things that you treat your clients with, right? If you're working with somebody going through grief because their mom had passed away, your mom didn't pass away, so you could see them as a professional. Everybody in the entire world dealt with COVID. This is the first time that we as professionals are dealing with the same thing. When we didn't have electricity, we didn't have water for 4 days and all that kind of stuff, the entire city was dealing with it. So what are some of the things that I did? And one of the most thought-provoking questions I one time got in one of my trainings is, do mental health professionals suffer or live with anxiety? And of course, the answer is yes. We're human beings. I say thank you. That means I'm alive when I have anxiety. What do? I have a self-care plan. My husband knows what my self-care plan is. Okay, go. I'll take care of it. Let's go for a walk. I know you like to go for a bike ride, right? So doing something for yourself, your self-care. Another very, very important thing is saying Tehillim, right? Psalms. They calm you down because really what you're doing is you're meditating on the words that you're saying. You're sort of humming, the words in your mind. And then the other thing that I would say that is extremely helpful is mindfulness and meditation. I think that a lot of people don't realize what self-care is. Self-care is such a buzzword that it's like, oh, I'm going to just go self-care and binge watch whatever, or I'm going to just go self-care and like ignore my kids for the next 3 hours. It's not really.
Right.
Self-care is something that you do mindfully. That before I take my walk, like the other night, I came home. I couldn't even wait for him to come home. He was getting too late. I'm like, Anon, I'm at the park. You know where I'm going to be. I need some self-care. I'm feeling overwhelmed. So he met me at the park. He knew exactly where I was. But basically what it is before you get to that point of it, that you mindfully know that I'm going to take an hour right now out of my day so that I feel better. Rather than me just randomly going for a walk, you're going to feel better. But if you go into it with a mindful way of doing it, another thing that people also don't know about self-care is that self-care could be done throughout the day. It doesn't have to be an hour walk. It could be 2 minutes of deep breathing. It could be 3 minutes of mindful meditation, full body scan, looking around the room and meditating. It doesn't necessarily have to be your 5-hour-long hike, which is my ultimate, right? Which is our ultimate self-care. We can't do that every day. We wouldn't have jobs, right? But we could do a meditation for 3 minutes. Hannah, are you okay?
Yeah, it's my, I thought I was over COVID, but I need a little bit more self-care.
So did I answer that question?
I think you did. I think you did a great job answering that.
Okay.
So you also gave a few different examples of things that you can do for self-care.
And another thing that I would say also, just to add on to it, in terms of educators, I do a lot of workshops for educators with their own anxiety in the classroom as well as anxiety of their students. 3 minutes of mindfulness with your students goes such a long way. You could do a full body scan and then you're calm, your students are calm, and you can start the day. And I'm talking for a principal now, you know, this becomes our pillow talk when we go back and forth, and it's like, well, most teachers don't have an extra 3 hours or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you know. But if you add in that 3 to 5 minutes, your lesson goes so much smoother. And your kids are so much more into what you're saying, and they're relaxed and they're taking in what you're saying. So essentially, you're really buying yourself time and calming yourself down as well.
So how do you do that? Can you give us a little tip on how do you do that?
The mindfulness?
Yeah.
You want me to lead you? You want me to lead you through a mindfulness exercise?
I think that our daughter was trained. Our middle schooler led a workshop for some of the Chabad shluchos at one point.
She did. Our daughter. So I'll tell you something, Hannah, and I can't stress this enough, that the work that we do here, it's not on our own. Anon and I don't do this by ourselves, right? We have so many community partners. My work at Jewish Family Service, we have so many community partners. Every shul in the city, every Chabad house, every Jewish communal organization, schools, you name it, they've partnered with us to be able to do this work. So one of our partners that we had in Torah Day School is we had somebody come in and do a like an anxiety self-care workshop over 12 periods, like basically once a month. And then when COVID happened, they did it on Zoom. And our daughter, our 12-year-old daughter, at the time, she's 13 now, she was in 7th grade, she learned tips on mindfulness. And it paid it forward, because when our 10-year-old son was having a hard time, she said to him, this is a great story. So he was having a hard time. So she said to him, okay, Zalman, I'm going to help you, right? So breathe in, start by breathing in. So he goes, so she qualifies it and she says, breathe in, but don't do it so like, don't overdo it. Breathe in slowly, like you're trying to relax yourself. So I think that was one case in point where we saw the resources from what the Jewish Family Service was giving, or from what other communal professionals were giving to Torah Day School. We saw translated not only to our daughter, but also to the kids that didn't take the class. And I think that that's what Anon and I, that's sort of the goal in education, is that you impart the lessons and then it gets translated onto generations and generations of people, because we're not building one individual at a time. We're building communities, we're building leaders. We are doing a lot to be able to build a better and just society.
That's amazing. That's so beautiful.
So transfer. That's the word you're looking for, right?
Maybe integration. Transference is a clinical term. You can't use it like that.
Well, in an educational context, what we're talking about is transferring the knowledge.
Right.
to the
Okay.
next one.
In an educational, not in a clinical setting, transference.
Transference. Okay. So you said that this is kind of your pillow talk. Like this is what you guys talk about all the time. Like, what do you do about as such busy giving people in the mental health field and in the educational field? It seems like you're always on. How do you deal with that stress personally?
We do a lot of self-care.
So
And Aiden
We
on
each have our own plan.
the-
so what do you do to unwind? So
No, I mean, I think that Anon and I, we value our family time together very, very much. And I think that our kids understand that we're shluchim here in Houston, Texas. You know, we represent the Rebbe, and it's not only a me or him kind of thing. The job that I do.
Sorry, just to translate, shluchim meaning emissaries who are representing the Chabad movement.
Right. Yeah. So we represent, and our job here is to, you know, help the people of the city of Houston. So our kids understand that mission, and they are aligned in that mission. But that being said, you can't work all the time. We hold very, very dearly Shabbos. Shabbos is a time that we both work hard all week, and then Friday night we bring with the kids. It's like one long Shabbos is, you know, one long time to be together. And the other thing that we do is we have things that we do together as a family. Like we do a lot of hiking. We do a lot of bike riding together. We bike rode 30 miles a couple months ago together as a family. So these are things that we value the time that we have together. We make the most of it.
That's great.
right, I'd agree with you.
That sounds like fun. 30-mile bike ride. Wow.
We got lost.
Yes,
We were
yes.
looking for something. You know, we're sort of new to the city of Houston, and somebody's
We've been
like,
new for 5 years.
yeah. There was something, just take this path all the way. You'll hit the end. We never hit the end. And it was like, wait, I think we've been riding for 15 miles already. So whatever.
Right.
Wow. Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So tell us a little about your family. How many children do you have?
So we have 5 kids. We have 5 children.
And the ages from?
I'm just joking. So we have a 15-year-old, and then we have a 13-year-old, 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Wow.
Or-
And they go through your school? Do they mind being you being the principal? I know my
They've
daughter
all
is a teacher this year, so
right. They've all been through my school. They've all of our children have always been my students, not as their teacher, unless something didn't work out that morning and ended up being a substitute for that teacher. But I've definitely my children have always went to our school, and you know, I think that like there's a it's an interesting kind of thing for them, because sometimes people, you know, feel like, oh, this is the principal's children, oh, this is the principal's name. It must be a privilege. There must be some kind of privilege toward that. And I think my children would want people to know is like, you don't know how much it costs. Okay?
for sure.
You don't know what comes with it, right?
For sure.
You know, so, you know, and I think that's definitely very challenging for them. Like sometimes you'll hear, I mean, kids being kids, like, you know, oh, you won this because your father's the principal, or this happens because your father's the principal. And it's kind of like, I worked really hard to get that myself, you know? And so, you know, and that's all part of it. And they identify as such, so it doesn't get them down. They identify with what we do. They're very proud of what we do. So they're able to handle those uncomfortable moments in stride, because they wouldn't want it any other way. But they respect the process and you know, and make sure that they follow all the rules.
Do you find you have different parenting styles because of the fact that you are the principal during the day and they don't, you know, do you need to compensate for that, Gitti, or how does it work?
So this is a fantastic question, and I'll tell you why. And we've often discussed this issue as to what to identify our different parenting styles, and we couldn't really come to an answer. We're too close to it. So we said, let's ask our children. So what do you think our parenting styles are? I'll just tell you what they said about me, okay? So they said that you're a teacher. So you have to explain everything really well, over and over and over again. As we're Mommy, she's like, just said it. That's it. That's it. It's a one-liner. It's concise. You're not teaching it to me, you know. So I think that.
I mean, I also it's interesting when you hear it from your kids. I don't think they understood what style meant in that regard, but I think it's interesting. I feel like where I fall short on my parenting, Anon picks up, and where Anon never falls short. But I'm saying that we sort of complement each other in the way that sometimes I find that he's less strict on certain things that I care more about, and he's more strict on things that I'm less strict about. So it's really just a matter of finding the happy balance in it. And also as teenagers, we're learning that our kids will come to us for different things. Like our son, who's an out-of-town yeshiva, will call us for something, emotional, and he'll call my husband when he's done a really great thing, or he's making us see him, or so, like he's making a party for a completion of something. There are different styles in that regard, but the one thing that our kids know for sure is that we're a united front, that there's no well, I'll tell mommy this and whatever. That's what we want to make sure that our kids know that. But it's just interesting how as teenagers you see them sort of going their own way.
Right. I mean, there is a theory in parenting stating that that there's kind of like a confidentiality clause between the children that want to go to and the particular parent, and that if requested, that you would mind that request. If the request is to keep it confidential, please don't tell mommy, or please don't tell Tati, Abba, Zaidi, whoever it is that is the legal guardian, then perhaps the one spouse would keep that from the other. So that's not our philosophy. We tell our kids that right away, that I may not approach you on the particular topic, but I am going to know about that topic. We are going to think about it together, and we come out with and whoever the mouthpiece is really irrelevant to the process, which is a shared responsibility. I'm not knocking that theory in parenting. It's just that this is where our comfort is. We both want to be vested. We both want to know what's going on. We both want to have voices on every aspect as what's going on.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, that you're a united front and you're together working on it. So like you said, one could address it, but you both know about it and you discuss it amongst each other. So yeah, I hear that. So when it comes to your students, what are your goals for them, Rabbi Francis?
So this is a great question, and I'll tell you this because my goals for them evolve as I evolve in education.
That's so profound.
And yeah, I get one of those every now and then. So yeah, this is the headspace. Right? So this is what I really believe in. I really believe that we go through phases in our practice. At one point, it may have been, we want to make the best academic institution, and how do we measure the greatest academic institution? Probably by grades, and what students say and what parents say seems simple, right? Good, everybody's a winner. Everyone's getting A's. And despite, we're not getting into grade inflation or anything like that, but we're saying that if people feel successful, then that's a good thing overall, and that's great. But I'm not there anymore. I find myself moving into a more controversial area, and this is where my practice is leading me. And that is really less of, I used to say this, but now I really mean it a lot more, my practice. It's less about grades and learning academics or analytical studies. It's more about becoming. Schools are more about becoming humans, becoming thriving individuals. It used to be about, getting an A is 100, and our self-value, our self-worth is relegated to what score we get on whatever test. And there's a hierarchy of people in your class, and your self-esteem may be affected or not based off of that. and schools get into a whole big issue as to how do we grade, and do we tell students if they're failing? Is there anything beyond the lower than a 65? And these are the politics of grading, the politics of assessments, and every school has to deal with it in a different way. And it's very difficult to really to find your place, and every school has to deal with it on their own. But I feel that's really a wrong direction at this point, because if we focus on students being successful human beings, okay? So, for example, the first part of this conversation this evening focused on well-being. It focused on self-care. These are the things that academia or even day schools, everything didn't really care about. We care about kindergarteners making sure that they could spell, or else they won't be able to do well in first grade. I mean, when did that happen, right? All of our schools do it, but are we really considering the stress levels that we're putting kids who ordinarily didn't feel stress? Like we talk about anxiety, there you go, test anxiety right there. We've just introduced, all right? So how do we have people go beyond that? How do we have teachers really focus in on what's most important, and that is becoming a healthy, well-being, thriving individual? What are the steps in order to get people to go that way? I give you a case in point that just happened today. I wanted to try something out. I had this idea that we just had a workshop just last night for, was it 2 nights ago?
Yeah, intuitive eating.
Right, called intuitive eating. There was an issue that came up in our school where one student made a comment about body image to another girl. And we understand that when it comes to language, different families have a different operating system of language. And when you come to school, you interface with each other. And what's sensitive to one family may be insensitive to another family. So we have to create safe schools for everyone, right? So we have to teach the kind of resiliency to our students, but we also have to teach students how to say, hey, you've been offensive, right? You offended me, right? So I wanted to start off with one of our younger classes. So I did this little session with the younger classes to say, well, let's talk about the word offensive. What does offensive means? Does it mean it's somebody has done something to me that I don't like? No. What offensive means is somebody hurt my character, hurt my person, who I am very deeply, something that I cannot change, something that my parents gave me either, through my DNA. It's God-given. This is the way God made me, right? I can't change it. This is who I am. And I'm very dear to who I am. And you've come and you've insulted me on that. I feel hurt. I said to my first grade class, what do we call that? I don't know. I said, I want to tell you what it's called. It's called being offended. And you know how you stop somebody when they offend you? You say, that's offensive. That's offensive. And what happens when you tell somebody that they've offended you? It's like we've all become accustomed to the buzzword bullying, and everyone said it has so many connotations to it. So it's so pregnant with so much meaning that when you drop that word, all sorts of bells and systems go off. If we teach children a new word to identify offensiveness, and we say, hey, that's offensive, what it does is that it teaches the other individual, the other student, the other child to recognize that they've crossed the line at the same time. So what's the knee-jerk reaction that we teach our kids now when they've offended somebody? To come back, the rejoinder is, I'm sorry. It doesn't matter if you understand it or not. It doesn't matter if your operating system is different and the way that your family talks has less sensitivities to whatever the particulars are of the altercation, the verbal altercation in the class. But if I say, that's offensive, it signposts that you have to move back and say, I'm sorry. I must have not known something. If we get our students at a younger age to be sensitive to that, we're building resiliency. We are building strong people that don't get boggled down by the neurological triangle of, do I fight, do I flee, or do I freeze? Sometimes it's just not a fair fight, and you have some students that are blessed with the gift of gab, and you have a student that, let's say, doesn't have that, and they just kind of like lambast them with like verbiage that they just freeze, or they run home and they cry to their parents. Right? So what do you do about that? Right? Or you have others that want to aggress. They want to say, no, I'm going to fight this. You can't do that to me. But if we train our students to be successful human beings, to be able to identify what's going on inside. So when you feel that welling up and you say, okay, how do I identify that? And more than important, identifying myself, identify to the other person. The other person says, I've crossed the line. We have to give students the tools to be able to do that. And this is something that we don't like to take out of academics. I would say the failure of education at this point is not taking out of the allocation of academic time to really talk about making children completely successful emotionally, psychologically. And if we do that, we'll see grade point averages go up because we're talking about people that want to succeed, right? Self-actualization is the top of the pyramid of what everybody wants to be successful, right? We were talking about that Maslowian theory of the the hierarchy of individual needs, right? So the individual needs, people want to be successful. They want to achieve. It's one of the core elements of thriving and being successful, right? So we have to take time out of the academic day to be able to teach you about the way you think, the way you feel, to give you the language, to give you words, to give you narrative as to why you should be successful. These are critically important things that educators sometimes default to the curriculum. Okay, defaulting to the curriculum. It's very, very.
And as you're saying it just hits me like, I mean, the Torah has all about onas devorim, how you
Correct.
cannot use words to hurt people. And those words that you're using to hurt people are really based on, like you said, it doesn't matter if it's a different kind of communication that each family has, but it's something that hurts me, you have to say sorry. So you're giving them the tools in that way, to...
I actually recently had this very conversation where a student challenged me on free speech. I said, 1 second. Free speech is very good for a democratic system, as the words of Winston Churchill says, that doesn't give us everything, but it's better than the rest, all right? But the idea here is that the Torah doesn't necessarily feel for free speech. Where does it say in the Torah for free speech? The Torah tells you, you cannot say gossip. You can't gossip about people. You can't, say slander about people. You can't say lashon hara. You can't say rechilus. You can't speak badly about people, say negative things about them. You can't. Where's the free speech? I should be able to say what I want. No, the Torah tells us that we have to have responsible speech.
Right.
We have to have responsible speech. That's what the Torah allows us to do. But free speech, to say what we want, to be offensive, this own is dvarim. That's right. Right? And what the Torah tells us, if we embarrass somebody, we forfeit our whole world to come if we embarrass somebody. So what's the weight and the power of words? So how much more so should we be modeling for our students how to speak? The challenge is how to work with our teachers on a day-by-day way to see this change within our academic system, to move from the set curriculum being the nuts and bolts of learning, meaning your analytical learning, your math, your reading, your chumash, your subjects, all your subject areas, to an integration of well-being, of midot, character development. That is something which some do it better, some do it worse, but it needs to be a standard in education, a standard integrated process. It has to be a priority in education, because otherwise we may be making individuals who are very smart, and again, depends on if you're analytically minded, but we may not be making successful humans that are compassionate and humane for the next generation.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Wow, that's amazing. So you're saying that this becoming, which is what you've moved from the academics to the becoming, and to look at the holistic child, includes a moral education as well.
Correct.
And some would argue, I guess, that schools don't have that moral obligation, but I guess you're saying that that's part of educating a child.
Right. Well, I think that I could, many years ago in secular education, there was this push for morality in education, but we as Jewish thinkers, understand that our entire world look to the world is anchored in our identity as Jewish people, alike among the nations, which is a call for our morality, to lead the nations in moral standards. Right? So if we're not teaching morality as it is dictated by Torah, then we are essentially, dare we say it's, maleducation. we could call it, if I said that right, you know? Right. You know, it's a miseducation of a generation of people to focus simply on academics. It's kind of like akin to like the famous saying of, there are those people who learn the Torah but don't acknowledge the giver of the Torah. And there are those people who love the people of the Torah but don't acknowledge the giver or the Torah itself.
Right.
Either way you look at it, it's flawed. Why? Because it's God, His Torah, and His people are one. That is one of the prime concepts, fundamental concepts of Hasidut, right? That God, His Torah, and His people are one. And that be said, if any one of us would bifurcate any one of those elements of this Judaic Trinity, if you will, it is an aberration. It is something other than the divine intention of what Torah and Judaism was meant to be.
Well, I guess that's why the Rebbe was so emphatic about making like a moment of prayer, a moment of silence in the public school, so the children could actually think about whatever vision of God they wanted to think, or whatever vision of morality or truth, but take that moment. I mean, you were talking about the importance of mindfulness. I guess that's the moment to be mindful of something higher than yourself, right? I guess.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, wow. Oh, wow. I can't believe how the time has flown. This has been fascinating, really interesting. Can you give us a last word about what you'd like to see for yourself, for your people, your students, for the people that you're involved with, for the future of mankind? What is something that you envision or that you'd like to envision? Broad question.
New building, not a fundraiser, a new building, a new early childhood center. So, you know, there's a donate button over there. Okay.
I think something that I want to take out of everything is that as a society, we're so connected, right, to our phones, to our devices, to whatever it is, but at the same time, we're so much disconnected. And what I want people to walk away with is knowing that human connection is so vital to each other. And that staying connected, or that if somebody is disconnecting in a way, it could be a sign of something, that reach out to the other person, make sure they're okay, not just sort of on your connected device, but try to find a way to keep connections alive, because that's really the vitality of human beings, that people just need to be connected. And I know that during COVID, it was hard to be physically connected, like socially distanced was like such an awkward word, because we weren't socially distanced, we were physically distanced from each other, right? But that just to stay connected to people, reach out to people that you respect. And if you're in the position of leadership or friendship, whatever it is, many times people won't reach out to you because they have different, stuff going on or whatever. You be the one to reach out to them and keep connected to them. And just to make sure that that's kind of what we're doing as a society. Ooh, there's our home phone.
We found it.
I think that's a great message. Like I said, my husband and I just had COVID, and, we were quarantined for 14 days. And the first 2 days, I absolutely loved it. It was like, wow, this is great. I don't with anybody, nothing. And then afterwards, it was really felt so isolating. And, so that element, and I so appreciated those people that did reach out and say, "Can't you say?" So I think that element of reaching out to other people and staying going through a hard time to reach out, but it's so important for all of us to be with one another. Okay.
Any last parting words?
No, I was going to say what you said.
Okay, it looks like the Houston community is really so lucky to have both of you, and I just want to bless you to continue on in your amazing work. Rabbi Enan and Gitti Francis, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I see they're trying to even hound you down in your house with the phone to be with us and
No,
to share.
it's just our teenager girlfriends. I mean,
Oh,
it's my 15-year-olds.
You're lucky she doesn't have a cell phone. That's good. It's good.
We can talk about my views on child cell phone if you like. We can go there as
That
well.
could be the next one.
Yeah.
I probably agree with
Plenty
you
of-
on that. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Rabbi Enan and Gitti Francis. Houston is lucky to have you. Continue on in your wonderful, wonderful work, in your education, and in your help with mental health and all the good things that you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Have a great night.
Good night.